We're going to make our text today a little longer than the other ones we've done. Today we're looking at Colossians 1 verses 19 and 20. So we're doing two verses. And the verse goes like this. And try to write it out in a similar way as I'm doing here. For in him, I want you to put 3 dots there and start a new line. For in him all the fullness of God, and put of God in parentheses because it's not actually in the text, but it is clearly God being referred to here. But the subject of the sentence is all the fullness. We're talking about God, the 3 in 1. And in him here is referring to Jesus. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased. Was pleased. And now put 3 dots, and we're going to continue that first part here, up here now. Was pleased to dwell. That's the first thing that the fullness of God was pleased to do. The second thing, and through him, we'll put 3 little dots, all the fullness of God was pleased to reconcile. That's the second thing that the fullness of God was pleased to do. Now, to reconcile means to bring 2 things together. So, what is God bringing together? He's bringing all things to himself. Now, all things is a big word. What do we mean by all things? Well, things whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. Okay, so again, just to go through. For in him, Jesus, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him, again, little j for Jesus, to reconcile all things to himself. Here, himself refers to God the 3 in 1. Whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his, that's Jesus, of his cross. Now, with a sentence like this, I find sometimes it's easier to understand them when I take them in reverse. Because at the bottom I see what the goal is. Here's the goal. All of this is about a God who wants to make peace. All the fullness of God did this because he wanted there to be peace. And there needed to be peace because there was no peace in all things. Whether on earth or in heaven, there was war. Not the throne room of God, but in the spiritual realms, there was this disorder and war happening. And all things on earth were caught up in a war. And there would be peace if all things were reconciled to himself, if they came to him. But in order for that reconciliation to happen, our broken world couldn't come to him. He had to come to us. So that is why the fullness of God was pleased in Jesus to dwell with us. In Jesus we see God comes to us so that there can be reconciliation and peace, but this comes by the blood of his cross. When he stepped into this world, he stepped in peacefully, and he came to show us the peace of God. And in spite of it, all we could show him was our anger and our wrath. In fact, that's why he ends up on the cross. It was then that Jesus, in that stillness of that one moment, was able to look down on humanity and to say, Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. We can get caught in these catch-22s of our conflict, and the cycle of fighting just continues on and on and on, and there doesn't seem to be a way to break it. And finally, the only way, and we know that this is true, that the fighting can stop, is when one just finally stops fighting. Or when someone steps in and says, break it up. But in order to let down my guard, I run the risk of taking a blow unguarded. And that's exactly what Jesus did on the cross. He came peacefully with his guard down, not fighting back, not defending himself, and as a result, was crucified on a cross. But Jesus didn't just step into our world of violence. He stepped in between us. He stepped in between us and God. So he took the wrath of God on himself. Even beyond that, he stepped in between me and you. In Matthew 25, Jesus says to these people as he's got them on his left and right, and it's the final judgment, and he says to the people on his right, you know, Blessed be you, for you fed me when I was hungry, you gave me water when I was thirsty, you gave me clothes when I was naked, you visited me when I was in jail, you took care of me when I was sick. And these people say, wait a second, thanks, but when did we see you hungry, thirsty, naked, and all the rest? And Jesus says, as much as you've done to the least of these my brothers, you did it unto me. Now if that's true for charity, and for a lack of charity, it's also true of our violence. It's also true of our fighting. That when we fight against each other and we show hatred towards one another, we are ignoring the fact that Jesus has stepped in between each of us. That Jesus died for everyone. What we do to the other, we do unto him. Now when I thought about that this week, it made me want to stop fighting. So my encouragement to you this week is when you go to your workplace, that you stop. That you stop. I know that there's some people that you really don't like in your workplace, and they've done some things wrong, and I'm not saying we don't deal with those things, but what we need to deal with first is the hatred, the animosity, the bad feelings. This week, see Jesus in them. See that Jesus died for that person. Whether they've accepted him or not, Jesus died for that person. And I know that there's some people that have hurt you. And I know that you're wounded because of what other people have done, because of their fighting. And how do you bring the peace into that situation? Well, this week I want you to do this. See them in Jesus. And what I mean by that is, see yourself as being in Jesus. You have been surrounded by his blood. You have been surrounded by his love. His peace has reached you this week. See them from that position so that his peace, the peace of Jesus, can guard your heart, and he can give you the same strength that he had there on the cross to say these same words. Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Also this week, when you're in those close relationships with your friends and family, see Jesus just wrapping his arms around them and around you, saying, I want you guys to be at peace with each other. That's why I died. That's what my cross was about, that there would be peace. But for yourself. And I know that a lot of us struggle with an inner peace. We feel conflicted and we struggle inside. Look at the cross of Jesus and look at the risen Lord and know that when he said, I want to bring all things to myself, you are part of all things. He died to bring you to himself.